Great to be back for our NBL Now mid-season reviews. Yes, that's right. There are no games this weekend because of the FIBA break. So it's actually the perfect opportunity for us to just take a bit of a deep breath, have an assessment of what we've seen so far. And we're doing it team by team. Today, the Brisbane Bullets is on the agenda. I'm Jack Heverin, Derek Rucker, as always, on a Thursday. Ruck, you're the perfect man to talk about the Brisbane Bullets. You see them more than anyone else.
Firstly, Jack, welcome back. It's great to have you back. I'm glad to be back on the mic with you and doing NBL now. But yes, the Bullets are one of my main accounts. And it's been a bit of a topsy-turvy season. Not terribly disappointing, but not great either.
So as they sit at the break, they're seventh, they're 4-6. There are some positives before we get into some of the big questions. Offensively, Ruck, they're not that bad. Number 3 in the competition for points per game, number 4 for offensive rating. But this has been one of your big things with Brisbane for 2 years now, really, at the defensive end of the floor. Number 8 in the competition for defensive rating and the same for points conceded.
Yeah, well, Justin Schuller came to Brisbane with a defensive mindset, obviously coming out of the Melbourne United system, and he understands the importance of playing good defense and what that means for your postseason opportunities. However, Brisbane just need to win games however they can. And if it's got to be on the offensive end, like we saw on Sunday with James Bateman exploding, then they've just got to accept that and try and move on and hope that eventually their defense comes to the party. But it may be a case, Jack, that they don't have the defensive personnel. And maybe they just have to rack up points and try and outscore people, which wouldn't be the most boring thing to see.
Well, I mean, based on what we saw the last game before the FIBA break with James Bateman and that Fitty piece, is that a possibility? Is that something that we could see more of them just go out and flat out score?
I think it's a very entertaining way to play basketball at home. And we know they've moved into the new venue. They want to get bums on seats. And if James Bateman or Keandre Cook are having exciting games on the offensive end, then that's going to facilitate people coming out or wanting to come out and watch this team play. Now, when you go on the road, you better find some defensive mettle and find a way to shut teams down. Otherwise, you're going to be playing catch up for the rest of the season. And the way the ladder is looking right now, Jack, it's going to be tough to catch some of those teams on top of you if you can't accumulate some road wins.
Well, let's throw some of the big questions out there that we are for every team. And we'll start with the biggest positive. What are you seeing as Brisbane's biggest positive so far?
Well, I think the fact that they've improved offensively. This is a team that has been notoriously bad at shooting the basketball. James Bateman right now is shooting it at 52% from the three. The Bullets have never had a person shoot that well from the three-point line throughout the history of their career. In fact, James Bateman is on track for some type of record-breaking percentages from the three-point line. Now, do we expect this to continue? Well, history would say probably not. But this guy has shot it over 40% from the three in different stages around the world throughout his career. So it's not unlikely that he can be one of the leading three-point shooters in the competition.
And I guess even to that extent too, Keandre Cook's shooting it at 38%, which is pretty good as well. And he was probably the one, Ruck, that when he arrived in the NBL had more of a sharpshooter reputation than Bateman.
And I think he probably has to be their number one focal point on the offensive end, despite the fact that Bateman had that huge scoring night. I think Keandre Cook gives you more variety in what he's able to do and how he's able to get buckets. But if he and Bateman can work out a 1-2 scoring combo and then have Prather and Bannon and Tyrell Harrison and all these other guys filling around, then Brisbane can be really dangerous and tough at home.
What about the biggest challenge for them so far?
This is going to be somewhat cruel. I don't think they've beaten a good team yet, Jack. Perth are going on reputation right now. They have not played well on the road. They've been disappointing on the road. They had the Friday night win. Then they had to fly all the way over to Brisbane. They looked flat. Most of their players looked semi-disinterested, and it was a poor performance. So Brisbane's beaten Southeast Melbourne when they were woeful. They've beaten New Zealand off the back of the USA trip. And if you add this one in now, it's like, okay, it was a decent win, but it wasn't anything great. So I think that's the biggest challenge, Jack. Can they knock off a Sydney? can they knock off a Melbourne United? Can you beat even an Adelaide, who are, again, another poor defensive team, but that type of game would have to be a shootout. But can Brisbane overcome them? If they can start knocking off some of those teams, Jack, then we'll start considering them a postseason contender.
Yeah, and particularly on the road, Ruck. That I agree with you completely about picking up some scalps. There's no bigger currency, I think, in this league in the last couple of years with how close everything is. No bigger currency than going to someone else's gym and winning.
But you look around, Jack, where's it going to come? You
I'm
know,
not sure.
they got one in Cairns. Okay, so they beat Cairns in Cairns.
Yep.
But Cairns had no one. They had a glorified all-star NBL 1 North team out on the floor that night. You called the game. You
Yeah.
saw what it was.
Yeah.
No disrespect to those guys who made a very competitive game out of it. But let's be real. That Cairns team is not like you're going to see in Melbourne at Melbourne United when you go play them down there. And it's just a really tough league to win road games.
Who's been the biggest surprise packet for the season so far?
I really like what Mitch Norton's done. And he kind of salvaged a lot of their momentum early in the season when James Bateman was struggling. Mitch Norton was there to pick up the pieces, and that's why he's so valuable. He's a real good stopgap measure, and he has an incredible ability to realize when others are struggling and how he needs to inject himself into the team dynamic. And he was able to do that. They got a couple of victories. Bateman and Cook are still finding their way into the league. So it's always good when you have a local veteran leader who can facilitate your evolution in the league. And I think that's happened really well via Mitch Norton.
And I mean, similar to last season, they had a pretty ordinary start. Things were looking a little bit down. They put Mitch Norton into the starting lineup, Ruck, just as someone to not only lead the team, but to have great positivity and great energy. And that's certainly helped them as well, hasn't it?
It has. And I think he's such a beloved figure within the clubhouse or the locker room that I think he just brings a lot of energy and good vibes to the team. But now, Jack, I think it's time to put Bateman in the starting lineup. He started the other night due to Casey Prather's late withdrawal. But maybe you go with a Norton, Bateman, Cook lineup and move Casey back probably to where he was going to be designated preseason, which is coming off the bench as your sixth man, your seventh man based on the circumstances and really providing offensive punch in that role.
And you have Bannon and Harrison as your 4 and 5. That's a pretty decent starting lineup right there.
It is. And I think Harrison has been solid this year without being spectacular. And I think Bannon has some room to grow within this season still.
Team MVP, is it James Bateman?
It's a tough one. It's a line ball between Bateman and Cook.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to give it to Bateman because it seems the team responds in a positive manner and it's reflected on the scoreboard and in the win-loss column when he performs well. So I've got Bateman just ahead of Cook.
So you've touched on a couple of things already, but what do we need to see more of in the second half of the season? I mean, if this team's going to be a team in and around the play-in bracket, what do they need to do more of?
They've got to get Bannon going. He's only shooting at about 38% from the field. It's not that he's played terribly. His preseason preparation was disrupted by injury. And also he had a long offseason where he was over in the NBA pursuing his dream. And it looks like physically he just hasn't found the fluidity that we saw at times last year. Now, if he can pick his game up to the levels that we expected, then Brisbane looked totally different. I think he can help Tyrell be better. And then the other one, of course, I think is Rocco. We saw a glimpse of what Rocco can do. 13 and 7 against Perth. He had a block shot. He brought a lot of good vibes to the team. So I would think if Rocco and or Bannon on any given night can supply good complementary scoring and statistics to what Tyrell is doing every night, then Brisbane are going to be a much better basketball team.
I know Andrew Bogut said this on Overtime a couple of days ago, but it's a very good point that having Emmett Naar out there to come off the bench and play with Rocco in that second unit, it made a big difference to the big boy.
It did. Emmett Nar's got a point guard savvy that is really well suited for our league. And he probably is playing with a lot of gratitude because he was basically out of a job when the Bullets picked him up. And sometimes you really appreciate and understand, and you're willing to do more. You're willing to sacrifice more because you appreciate being back in the league. And he showed the other day that he is an NBL point guard and he can play a valuable role for the Bullets.
Two-part question. Firstly, what's their mid-season report grade?
I give them a C plus, Jack. And I think that's a fair grade based on what we've seen. Again, it could have been better if they would have knocked off, a Melbourne United at home or a Sydney at home, but that hasn't been the case yet. And the jury's still out on the strength of this team overall.
And then the second part is they're seventh right now, as we said, 4-6. If you were to jump ahead to the end of the season, are they finishing any higher than that?
I think they're probably somewhere between the sixth, seventh, or eighth best team in the league. But Jack, our league is crazy, man. It's crazy. Anything can happen, and we know this. And if Brisbane run off, say they go and steal a game on the road, they go to Perth coming out of the FIBA break. If they go over there and steal that, Jack, now they will jump Perth, I believe, on the ladder, put Perth in a precarious position, and then your confidence builds and you start establishing momentum. The team has a collective belief in itself, and anything's possible at that point. So I would say if they maximize their playing potential, they're probably able to finish fifth, but they can also finish all the way down to number 9.
Well, I had a look at sort of what's coming up for Brisbane because it feels as though if they can get things right, then some opportunities might open up for them. So as you say, their first game back is a Friday night in Perth. Now that Bryce Cotton's back to full health and all that sort of stuff as well, that's going to be an enormous challenge for Brisbane. Then after that, they host Adelaide, and then they go to Melbourne in round 11. Now, the Adelaide situation, as we record right now, we don't know what that looks like depending on what happens with Kendrick Davis and Montrezl Harrell. And then in round 12, they host Southeast Melbourne, and then they go to Sydney. Even if they can win 2 of the next 5, Ruck, it keeps them in the hunt. My worry for them is if they go 0-5 or 1-4 out of these next 5, I think they're in big trouble.
And that's correct. But I look at those games, Jack, the 5 you mentioned, and I believe they can legitimately believe they can win 3 of those games based on circumstances. Look, I know they beat Perth in Brisbane, but Perth are a whole different proposition out there. Bryce and John Riley and Keanu, they all have had time to get everything better. That's all I'm going to say about that situation. They need to get that situation better. And I think it will be better by the time Brisbane go out there. But then you look at that Adelaide game here. You've got to win 2 of those games at home, and then you've got to steal 1 on the road. Jack, if they get to a 7-8 situation, they're playoff ready. They're play-in ready, man.
Yep, they're in the hunt. They've just got to go 500 for the next month, and they're in the hunt, really, aren't they? So it's fascinating. Now tonight, Ruck, as we say goodbye to the Brisbane Bullets and we take a look at what's coming up tonight, special edition of the Shootout. This has got a lot of people talking this concept right now. Teams have had to go and put their nominations in for an away game during the month of January where they think they are going to put more points on the board in someone else's crib than anyone else. Who would you choose?
I'm going to take Adelaide first, and then I would take Perth second, and then I would take Brisbane third. Adelaide and Perth play so fast at home, Jack, and they're both not great defensive teams at home. So I would feel very confident as, say I'm a mid-range offensive team. I would be very confident going down to Adelaide and over to Perth and getting the chance. You want as many possessions as possible to score the basketball. So I like both of those venues, and they're both really fun places to play basketball where we've seen high-scoring contests take place.
I'll tell you who I wouldn't choose, Ruck. Under any circumstances, regardless of where they are on the ladder, I would not go to my State Bank Arena and back myself to put more points on the board than Tassie.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And also, you run the risk of offending Scott Roth. And we know He likes to take that stuff on board and really inject it right into the veins of his players.
You ever seen that part in The Last Dance where Michael Jordan says, and I took that personally? That'll be Scott Roth if someone chooses Tasmania.
He lives for it, man. We know he does, and we love that about him.
That's coming up tonight. You'll be there alongside Felix and Hools. We'll find out who the teams choose, and we'll explain the whole concept and what it looks like. And, of course, for you, the fans, there's a lot of money up for grabs if you can choose the correct team and the correct points as well. NBL.com.au to check it out. And, of course, tonight on ESPN as well. Ruck, have a great day. Fascinating to see what the Bullets do for the second half of the season.
It certainly is. And everybody get involved in the Summer Shootout. I think it's a lot of fun during the month of January. It's just going to be something to add a little bit of spice to the NBL competition.
We'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us on NBL Now.